Ooh. Hey, welcome to our live interview today. I am really excited, and I hope all of you have been having a lot of fun this month with our interview series, our Operation Interview Plan. We're really excited about all of the daily things. So if you haven't started doing interviewing yet and learning more about interviewing, go check it out. It's on our plans page, connections-experiment.com/plans. And in conjunction with that, today we are super excited to bring you a really cool interview with our friend Heidi. Her name is Heidi Arave, and we actually have this kind of random connection. We'll talk about it a little bit, but just a shared love for stories, but she has this really cool background. So let me introduce her a little bit. She graduated from BYU with a degree in recreational therapy, with an emphasis on the geriatric population. She began her career at an assisted living center where she planned and carried out activities for the senior community. It was there that she discovered the magic of storybooking and the power of preserving life stories. She has spent the last 20 years helping hundreds of people preserve their stories. So you can see why we felt like she would be an incredible person to chat with today and basically just learn from all of her experience. She clearly has a love and a passion for this, and so we're excited. So I'm going to bring her on and say, hey, Heidi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Thank
Welcome.
you for having me on today.
Yes. Thanks for joining us. I know that life's busy and crazy, and so we appreciate you so much being willing to just come share your wealth of knowledge with us. So thank you.
You are welcome.
So tell us, so I am really curious, like for that degree, what made you decide that was what you were going to study? Because that is so different.
Random.
I know. Yes, random is the right word.
It's totally random. Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to study. And so I knew I liked being with people with disabilities. I had a niece that was born with hydrocephalus, and people would come in and work with her. And I thought, that's really cool. Like, people come in and work with people with special needs. And then in high school, I was a peer tutor and did things like that.
Yeah.
And so my sister-in-law had told me about this rec therapy option. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And then I looked into it. It was basically just doing fun things with people who have disabilities and helping people still enjoy life, even though they may not be able to do things how everybody else does them. So that's kind of how I fell into that.
That's super cool. I love that. Love that. So tell me a little bit about just kind of your background and how you got into interviewing and stories, and even, a little more in depth, just what your story is, how you came to be the expert that you are.
All right. Well, I was working at an assisted living center after I finished at BYU. And some ladies came to me, and they're the founders of Heritage Makers, Candy and Chris and Sharon. And at the time, it wasn't even called Heritage Makers. It was a different company. And they had first ever one-off printed books. This was 20 plus years ago. And they said, hey, we help people write their life stories. Can we come and talk to your residents here and tell them about what we do, and so we can preserve their lives? And so they came and they showed me the concept, and I fell in love with it. I was a scrapbooker. I've always loved pictures my whole life, scrapbooked my whole life. And this concept of a book with pictures and words that was just a simple little storybook that grandkids could read and stuff. And I was engaged at the time. So I said, can I do my story? So I wrote my love story. We displayed it at our wedding reception. It was super fun. And then after I got married, I quit at the assisted living center, and I started working with Chris and Candy and Sharon, helping people do their stories. Okay. And so one of the ladies, her name was Karma, that lived at the assisted living center, was one of my dear friends. Like, I loved her. She was super sweet, and she would come to all the activities. She was really quiet and kind of shy and just kind of sat in the back. And so I said, Karma, let's write your life story. And she said, no, I've never done anything. Nobody would want to read it. Like, no, thank you. And I was like, no, but people want to read it. And she kept telling me no. So then I went to her daughter and I said, hey, Marcely, will you help me? Like, I want to write your mom's story, but she doesn't want it written. So can you help me anyway? So we worked together, and she gave me the stuff, and we put together the storybook. Yeah. And so then I went to go give her book, and she opened it up, had it wrapped all cute. And she opened it up, and she was like, this flood of memories came through. She looked at her picture and she went, "Oh, I used to look like that." And then I read each page to her, page by page, and I could never tell the story without crying. But she was like, "Oh, I did that. Oh, we did go there." Like her whole life, she had been widowed for several years, living this in a little studio apartment by herself in an assisted living center. And she went from zero confidence to, oh my gosh, I had a great life and I did stuff. And so
Right.
after that, I was like, oh my goodness, like to just see her come alive again and realize that she
Yeah.
mattered was so
Mhm.
magical.
Oh
And
my
so the
gosh, I
next day,
love
her
that.
daughter called me and was like, hey, Karma wants to order like 23 copies of the book. She wants all her grandkids to know her as that grandma, right? Not just the grandma that they see.
Yes.
And so after that happened, and this was 20 years ago, I thought, this is amazing. Like, I want to do this for everybody. I want every senior living in an assisted living center to feel important and to feel valued and to know that they matter. And I was like, if we could build libraries inside these centers of everybody's life stories, you know, and so that's kind of
Yes.
where it started. So it
That's
was just really cool to see how it totally transformed her.
well,
It
and
really gave her life back to her.
yeah, no, I love that. Like, I feel like I haven't had that experience on that level before. So it's really cool to hear that healing power it almost gave to her. Because how many of us though have like approached one of our loved ones and been like, "Oh, tell it. I want to record your story," and they're just like, "I don't remember anything. I don't have anything to tell." Like, I feel like when you said that in the story, I was like, "Oh gosh, we've all been there, right? We've all heard
Hmm.
that." And so I love what you said there because you took it from like, no, we're not just recording it for like your posterity, but like even for you to be able to relive who you really are. Because I can see that. Like, I'm such a different person now than I was as, a teenager or whatever. And I could see yourself like losing that identity, even though it's a big part of you, if you kind of got to this later point in life and you started feeling almost not important. And you can see that in your grandparents too. I feel
Hmm.
like you do see that. That's a common thing, which I'm sure you're more familiar with than any of us. But
Yeah, and the thing is, they
yeah,
don't want to tell you their story necessarily, but they want to talk about their life. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like, it's kind of like they don't want to, oh no, I haven't done anything special. Like, they just want to be this humble, like, no, no, I don't need to brag about my life. They don't want to share it. But once you just start casually asking
asking that question.
questions,
I
then they're
love
happy to share.
Yeah, they don't want to necessarily tell you their story, but they do want to talk about, yes,
Mhm.
because I feel like that's true. So often you just get them talking, right? And then
Yeah.
they just, you can't like,
And then you can't get them to stop talking.
yes, that was like when we were writing the plan for this month, I was like, or the operation interview plan, I was like, we said, what's the biggest hurdle? What's the biggest hurdle? And I was like, it's time, because once you've done one, once you get going, you're not going to be able to stop, and you're not going to know how to stop, even if you have other things. So you have to plan like a full day for sure, or else, or else you might, have to cut them off when it's just getting good. So I think that's the hardest part of all of this, but, oh, sorry. I have comments, so I want to just make sure. Okay.
Oh,
If you're watching and you have questions for Heidi, be sure to throw them in the chat, because I will ask her questions as we work through this. But what I really want to hear from you is, since you've had all this experience and you've worked with a lot of different people in different parts of their life, or different and probably tons of really different backgrounds. What are some of your biggest tips and tricks for getting a good interview, getting them to share their story? Maybe for people who aren't as forthcoming, what are those kind of like checklisty things you do and things you keep in mind, I guess. Does that make sense?
okay. Yep, totally makes sense. So one of the things I do, like, Reader's Digest versions of their stories. Like, I'm not
Okay.
doing the full, like, this thick of a book. Like, I'm doing like a 20-page, 40-page, like, short summary that a grandchild literally will read as a bedtime story.
Love
Um,
that.
so it's not overwhelming. So the interviews I do are typically an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's it.
Okay.
So I think that's helpful too, going into it. They know I'm not going to be here all day. Like, it's not like, I let them know this is going to take about an hour, hour and a half. And
Yeah.
if you have more to share, I can come back later.
Mhm.
Especially if you're working with the elderly, they get really tired. That long a stretch of a time is sometimes a little too much.
Right.
And you do have to be flexible. Like, you can schedule an appointment and you may show up and they're too tired or they're not feeling well that day. So just being flexible.
I like
So
that.
that's one thing. So I let them know up front, like, this is how long this is going to take. And if at any point you're too tired or you're exhausted, just tell me and I can come back another time. So I do that. But the most important thing, even more so than what you say, my number one thing is how I make them feel, right? Like my whole purpose is one, yes, to capture their story, but more importantly, to let them know that they're heard and that they're seen and that they matter and that their story is validated, right? So I always leave saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing with me. Like, thank you for taking time. Your stories, and I just totally genuinely like compliment them on sharing. Like, a lot of these people have been through some hard things and they'll share those with me. And it's really tender, right? And so they become one of your dearest friends because you know their story. So I always say, once you know somebody's heart, you know their story. And until you know their story, you don't know their heart.
Yes. I love all of these. Like, you have so many good one-liners. I'm throwing them in the chat so people can see them later. So we know it looks like I'm typing. It's because I'm taking notes, because I love what you're saying. Like, helping them to feel all of those things. That's such a good point. Because
And especially in today's world, right? Especially with COVID, a lot of these people, especially the elderly, they've been sitting in their rooms alone for a long time, right? Family couldn't come visit for a long time. Sometimes they couldn't even, I mean, they've got their friends that live there in the communities, but sometimes they're still quarantined in their rooms alone. So I've even done interviews over Zoom. When it was quarantined and they couldn't leave. So you can do that. You can do them over Zoom if you want. Another key thing is find a place where there's no distractions. That's important. Just keep it so it's not all this chaos going on. And then just be prepared yourself, like know what you're going to ask so you can do it efficiently and get through the interview. And like I said, mine is short interviews. Like I've told them this is how long we have, and I try to get through everything. So I do say, like, if they keep going on about something, I'll be like, that is so awesome. I can't wait to hear more about that, but we got to move on to the next question.
Right.
And then I just go on to the next question. And then when I come back and visit and do follow-up stuff, then I can say, hey, tell me more about that time when you were, and then you can follow up with you've got a lot of conversation pieces to talk to next time you go to visit.
Right. No, that's so perfect. And I love that follow-up concept, because it's true. Then you can kind of keep this first one on, like, that Reader's Digest version you talked about, and then kind of work on adding in the more meaty stuff, like with future ones as you have that. I love that. So do you take them, and sorry, this is do you take them, what do you do with them? Like, you record it generally and then transcribe it, or like what's your process that way?
So my process is I do an audio, like I record it on an audio recorder, but I actually type it. I've done both. So I've typed as they've talked, and I've also handwritten it as they talk. Just kind of, I have an outline that's kind of fill in the blanks. So I'll be like, when were you born? Da, da, da. What, and I just kind of ask the questions, and it's already written in story flowing format kind of. And then I just will either scribble the notes, or I'll just kind of type as they're talking. That I found that way is faster if you type it as they're talking. Because then if I handwrite it, then I still have to go home and then type it all out. But if I type it during the interview, that part's already done. So that speeds up the process if you just type it as you go. And then the other thing I don't recommend transcribing it. I mean, for what I do, if some people want to transcribe it, and that's just the story if you want their exact words, but sometimes it's long and lengthy. So I only transcribe. Well, I don't ever really transcribe, but I used to go back and look through the transcriptions, like to try to find, like, what was the name of that store that they worked at? And it would take forever. So I've learned, don't worry about that. It's easier to just ask them the next time you go, hey, what's the name of the store you worked at? And then they tell me and I put it in, right? So the details and things like that, it's easier to just ask them if you didn't catch it in the thing. But if they want an actual transcription of the whole thing, then you could go back and listen through the audio and transcribe it. But I just pull the summaries. I kind of take their story and then summarize it.
Right. Okay. So cool. I love that. So we have a couple of quick questions from a couple of people. So here's one. How do you ask people to interview? She says, I get really nervous about this. Like, what if they say no? So what's your approach for asking?
Okay. So what I've done, So I kind of volunteer I kind of do multiple things here, but I at an assisted living center um, that I have been working with for years, trying to kind of streamline this process.
Mhm.
I recently met, actually last week, I met them and I said, hey, I'm going to be coming around and I'm going to do more stories. Who would like their stories told? And nobody raised their hand, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, let me put it this way. And I said, I'm giving you guys an opportunity to share your advice for your posterity. Like what these books are is for you to tell the generations that you've never even met yet, the grandkids that are going to be born after you're not here, what's most important to you,
Right.
what you want them to know. And I'm like, that's the value of what your story is. Like they get to know you and then they know what's most important that you can pass on. And after I phrased it that way, the hands started going up and people were like, oh, I want to do it. I want to do it.
Okay.
So I think a lot of it is one, they're overwhelmed or they think, oh, this is such a prideful thing for me. I don't want to like
Yeah.
brag about myself. But I think sometimes if you turn it to, this is about your posterity, this is about what you want to leave the next generation, then
Right.
they get that.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that's mine. So if it
No,
is,
I think that's
one of them's
and I
beeping
don't
off. I like looked, but I can't tell, so I apologize.
no, that I think is mine.
Okay, great. Don't worry then.
I don't
just
even know
like,
how to turn that. I thought I closed it, but apparently I didn't.
I was just afraid it was distracting you. And I was like, I don't know, because I just installed a new update on my computer. So,
Yeah.
but well, okay. So I do love that. It's kind of that concept of reframing it to help them know, like, I guess the summarizing of it would be reframing it so that they realize this is like how you can share what your values, right? Like
Mhm.
pass your values on and help other people, your family, most importantly, know
And
what
if they say no, no isn't no forever. Maybe it's just bad timing, right? Maybe their
yeah.
life is really crazy right now and it just isn't going to work for them. But
Yeah.
like just, maybe say, okay, maybe now's not a good time. I'll check back with you in a few months or
Yeah.
just maybe when things aren't so busy.
Yeah. So, what do you feel like some of the coolest, maybe not necessarily the coolest stories, but the coolest things you've witnessed from recording their stories? Like I know you shared the one about Carmen. Like, is there an overall that you're like, this kind of is a
Yeah.
big takeaway for me or whatever?
Well, the cool thing is how it connects people, like all generations. So I've had volunteers from BYU help me do stories, have had wonderful experiences. I used to take my little 4-year-old daughter with me every day to do the interviews, and the connections that she made with the old people and the connections they had with this darling little girl that would come in and visit with them was
Right.
magical, to the point like they became grandparents, right? And then when they pass away, it's like you're mourning the loss of a grandparent.
Mhm.
So the new friendships are amazing. You get these connections, and then it really does bridge these generations. So we've got college kids who have never even really known what life was like for these people, right? I mean,
Right.
we kind of know because we're kind of the middle generation, but the next generation beyond us are like, what, you don't have a cell phone? You don't have running water? Like, they don't even comprehend that, right? So that's been really cool. And then it's like a firsthand history lesson because these people are like, oh my gosh, this, like, you were there when they declared that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and you were there when
Right.
the war was over, and all of these cool things that we read about in the history books, we can actually learn from people who have lived it, which is really cool. And
Right.
then it strengthens the families for sure, because Karma's grandkids, Karma's been gone for probably 15 years now.
Oh, wow.
All
Okay.
of her grandkids, and even ones that have been born in the last 15 years, know her. Like they read her book over and over, and they can tell you everything about Grandma Karma
I love
because
that.
of her storybook. And so that's really cool how it's connected. And then one quote, let me just read. So
Yeah.
my one volunteer, when I asked her, I said, will you just write like a little experience of what has happened with you sharing? And she said, there is something very unique and special about sitting across from someone and learning of all the moments in their life that together create the masterpiece of a person they are today. The best part about it all is as they relive their story, you see their faces brighten with excitement and their perspective on their current stage of life change. It helps them to realize the wonderful people they are and remember the incredible life they lived. And then she went on to say, and it not only gives them meaning, their life meaning, but it gives her life meaning and purpose as she has spent time,
Mhm.
investing and learning and just spending time with these people who so often feel forgotten and are just kind of in the
Right.
last stages where their kids are too busy to visit them and things. So it's really magical to see how it all connects. And
Well, I think that's my favorite like takeaway from this interview is just I think our natural inclination is to think interview great for posterity and connecting your posterity with you in the future. I think that's like the one that's the obvious benefit of it, but the fact that it's healing and freeing and what's the word, gives them their self-esteem and their,
Mhm,
you know what I
mhm.
mean, renews kind of who they are for them. Like that is a benefit I wouldn't have thought of before talking to you. So I love that because it's so important. And how many of us know like our grandparents are struggling and feel lonely? Like how much would we more be willing to do it if it was like, oh my gosh, I know I could help them now because I know
Yeah.
this, right?
Mhm.
And so I love that. So thank you for like bringing that to our attention. I just think that's a really cool benefit. So with that, I guess my question is, do you, sorry, I want to make sure I read it. I'm going to read it. So I make sure I word it right. But so that's, you've kind of nailed it there, but have you noticed any psychological benefits? Because our project really focuses on like, mental health benefits, just things like that when helping someone write the story for you or for them. Obviously we've talked about for them, but how about for you? Like have
So,
you felt like it helps
oh,
you?
there's so much happiness. Like every time I leave a story, it's like I've just like you just have so much adrenaline. You're so happy and there's just so much joy. Like I get on the phone and I call my friend immediately. I'm like, guess what I just learned about this person? Da, 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 da. Like
Yeah.
it's so rewarding. Like it's so fulfilling.
So,
But one of them, like with connections, well, their confidence increases. So we've kind of talked about that. But there was one guy we interviewed and he was kind of going blind, and so he couldn't see very well, and he would sit at the same table every day with the same ladies that he was familiar with, always. Like he lived there for months and months and months and never changed tables. And after we gave him his story, he was like, he looked at the cover and he's like, "Hey, who's that good looking guy on the cover?" Right? And he was just all excited, and
yeah.
he started sitting at other people's tables. Like he felt confident enough to go introduce himself and talk to other people now,
Okay.
which was super cool.
Yeah.
And the happiness for residents increases. One lady, her husband had just passed away, and we did her story. And she says, I read my book every day, and it makes me happy because I relive the happy times and I don't have to focus on the hard times now.
I
So
love
that
that.
was super cool. It stimulates memory. So a lot of these things they haven't thought about in years, right? I'll ask them a question. They're like, whoa, that was like 70 years ago. I don't know, right? I'm like, that's okay. Take your time, whatever.
Right.
It starts triggering memories and things that they haven't thought about for a really long time, which then awakens memories. And we
Yeah.
look at pictures too. And when you look at pictures, research has proven that looking at pictures makes you happy. So that ties into it as well. And
Yes.
it helps eliminate the guilt too. A lot of them are like, oh, I haven't done anything. Like I have all these pictures, my story, I've written nothing. So they were kind of feeling this little guilt and shame of like, I didn't do anything to pass on my story. And so it gives them that freedom of like, ah, that guilt's over. It's done. Like I have something to
That's
pass
true.
on.
That's true, because how many of us live in that guilt in
Hmm.
that guilt space, right? So that's true. Oh, I love that so much. I feel like you're just listing benefit after benefit after benefit. For us, the interviewee and the interviewer, what we're the interviewer, they're the interviewee, but for both, right? Like it's just so many benefits. And so it's kind of like, why don't we make more time for this? I think that's the hurdle is just choosing, committing, and doing it, right?
Hmm.
So I love that. So, do you have any like last tips that you're like, okay, here's like something I just definitely want to make sure you remember this, and this, or any like last minute words of wisdom that you want to impart upon all of us?
Probably just the most important, which I said before, is just to make sure they feel important and respect what they have to say. Like if a lot of times I've asked, like, hey, did you serve in the war? And I'm always super respectful because some will be like, I don't want to talk about it. And and then you just respect what they say. That's totally fine. Thank you for your service. Okay, the next question is, and validate, but don't ever push an
Yeah.
issue and just kind of let them, oh, here's one other thing. This is important.
Okay.
A lot of times people will say, I had really hard stuff happen in my life. Like, I don't know if I should put that in for my grandkids to read, right? Or whatever that issue might be. And my advice to them is to put it in to an extent that you don't have to say all of the details of what happened. But if you don't put the hard in, then your grandkids are going to read thinking they had a perfect life. I'm having hard times. Why didn't my grandparents have any hard times? And if our kids and grandkids read about grandma and grandpa struggling in the loss of a child or divorce or alcoholic parents or anything like that, and they made it through and they're stronger because of it, that gives the next generation strength and confidence knowing grandma and grandpa made it through it, I can make it through it. And so it gives that strength and that sense of belonging, that they've got this kind of this to belong in a place where they can find the courage and the strength to get through their hard times because their grandparents were willing to share their hard times.
Have you ever gotten to witness that firsthand? Like, can you think of any examples where you've witnessed that personally? Like, and I'm putting you on the spot with that. So if the answer is you can't think of it, fine.
Personally, so my grandmother, she lost a son. He was just younger than my mom. So her second child passed away when he was, I believe, 10. But from like age 2 to 10, he was kind of, he had some medical issues and he was a healthy little boy and then turned into this like kind of vegetable and couldn't do anything. So that was really hard. She never really talked about it.
Yeah.
But when I interviewed her and did her story, she told me about it. And so that was super cool. But then, like I said at the beginning, my brother had a daughter who passed away. She was born with hydrocephalus and she died when she was about 5. And so for me, I look at that going, my brother can see that my grandma went through that and made it through. And now they went through it and made it through. So it's always comforting to know that, you know, what, and that's one of my, and because of situations like that, that's one of the questions I ask in the interview is, what was your hardest trial and what helped you get through it? So that the grandkids reading it can be like, oh, wow, like they relied on faith, or they relied on Heavenly Father, or they relied on their neighbors or their, you know, their community or whatever that was. But it just helps make everything more real when you share the hard with the good, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much. And that is so perfect because that was exactly why this project got started, because there were so many of us during pandemic that were just struggling and like, this is hard, you know? And we wanted to say, hey, there is power in this connection. There's healing in this connection. There is strength in connections that families make and give to each other. And so I love that you were willing. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable with that and sharing that with us, because I think that's what helps us all understand that there is so much value to this beyond like your basic, even like what I came to the table with, like, oh, of course it's good because we can read our grandma's story later in life. Like, no, there's so much more to it. And as we peel back the layers and discover that in our own lives, I think that we just have armed with way more power to take on this crazy world.
Yes,
so,
for sure.
I love it. So in closing, just I'm curious, like tell us a little bit about your website and like what your website does so that we can kind of help people know.
Okay. Well, I have a few different things that I offer. I offer a DIY kit. It's like a guidebook that walks you through how to do the storybook in a simple form. That tells you the interview questions, exactly what to do, how to get the photos, and then you submit all of that to me, and then I create the book, and then you guys get the finished product. So that's one option. I have just simple little questionnaires if you just want to get started with just, well, there's multiple questionnaires. You can do a simple one that's like 5 questions that you definitely don't want to miss. If you don't do anything but this, you know, do that type of thing. And I have full service options where I'll call and do the interview over the phone, create the book, do even do like video options, things like that. I do softbound books and hardbound books, and then a full custom book if people want like bigger than just the little short interview where they can answer 68 questions. That goes into lots of details of all areas of life, and then put that into a book, and they all have pictures, full color. So there's lots of different options that people
those sound perfect. It kind of takes the overwhelm a little bit out of it. You don't have to start from scratch. You can start at whatever level you want. If you don't want to have to do any of it, we call you. If you want to do most of it, but you just need some help getting started, then it's perfect. So mylifemystorybook.com, right? That's where we're going to go for all that information. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. Heidi, actually, we met her through a mutual friend, Amy, and she's going to join us in a couple of weeks on our other interview. And we're going to talk some more about interviewing the more difficult stories and how to draw those stories out and help people heal using some tools and things that she has done. And Heidi works with her on that project as well. So Heidi's amazing and does so many things. And we're so grateful for her expertise and her knowledge and her willingness to share that with us today. So thank you, Heidi. Sincerest thanks for joining us.
And you are so welcome. Thank you for letting me come.
Yeah. So we will catch you later, hopefully, again, and hope to look forward to hearing from you and seeing all the cool things you do. And hopefully some people will come and learn more from you. So thank you. All right. We will.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Olivia.